Thank you very much for this fascinating talk. Yes, indeed, there was an auction in Paris. I think the library,
Yes.
one of the libraries in Paris, they bought the piece of map that was recently discovered, right?
Yes. So just there is not a missing part from the map in the Vatican Library, but there are, as far as we know, of the first page, which shows the whole map of China, we have 3 copies. So probably he was working not only on one map, but he was working on 3 maps. And there is one map which was in a Jesuit college, ended up in a French library, and it had a missing part. And that missing part was on auction and now is matched together with the map.
Yes. So maybe we can move now to Q&A session. Everybody here present and also everybody online who joined us online is welcome to ask questions, either unmuting himself, herself and asking questions, or maybe it would be more practical to formulate the question through chat room. So Barry will be reading or sending us the questions or showing us the questions if there are any. Before that, I would like to make a simple comment or maybe even a question, first question about this strategy of Boym. It was, of course, we can look at this simply from the scientific point of view, and definitely it was one of the first contributors to this exchange of knowledge. For the first time, Europe at that time could see certain exotic fruits that did not exist. And it was something really fascinating for himself to discover those fruits along the way through Africa, India, up to China. So it was really a fascinating exploration. I just imagine kind of passion that he had for the first time documenting something. And then I wonder my favorite fruit, whether my favorite fruit was documented by him, durian. But I wonder what he would think about durian, right? It does not appear there, but his opinion about that. Yeah, this is just a funny comment. Anyway, the Flora Sinensis, I think there is a kind of introduction where he describes beautifully comparing China to a garden where God is the one who cultivates, and all this beauty of whatever the discovery of them, so many different kinds of fruits for the first time. He even uses the words, as you quoted, China, it has everything.
Yeah.
So this
what I said is like he says it has more than the Roman Empire had.
Definitely more than the Roman Empire. So for him it was like a kind of discovery, can we say spiritually, kind of discovery of the biblical Eden, or I don't know. He was probably so fascinated by China, by discovering so many things, that it would be eye-opening experience to many Europeans to see such a richness of culture and flora and fauna in China, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in a sense, I mentioned that the pineapple shocked the Europeans because it was not growing from a seed, but you had to put the trunk into the soil. The same way, like the Europeans, especially a Jesuit, like it's always with the Bible in their head, were looking for the biblical like Garden of Eden. And he saw that in China, some of the fruits, some of the trees actually had fruits 2 times a year and not only 1 time. And for example, in the map, the Chinese map, there are some beautiful flowers that he shows. And I was wondering, like, it's almost like this abundance that he is constantly showing, that he's like, in the map he puts some flowers, but actually in Flora Sinensis we only have all these fruits because you almost have no time for the flowers. They are always blossoming and they always have fruits available, and that abundance obviously like shocked him, or in a positive sense, that is very much present in the ad lecture and like at the presentation at the beginning.
Okay, and now I can give you opportunity to ask questions. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for this lecture. It was super informative and very interesting. And I have a lot of questions. I will ask maybe Tommy to for now. First one is about setting Boym's work in a comparative perspective, because you noted, and you just mentioned it again, that for him, the image of nature in China was closely related to this kind of, how to put it, in comparison to the portrayal of the new nature in the world. Boym's descriptions were related to those kind of political and social metaphors, right? They were, or not really. This is my first question, because you mentioned, for example, that the fruits he was using to describe it were often the fruits taken from markets, that the image of China as this empire and kingdom that is more important and more abundant in terms of nature than Rome is something that is kind of contrasted with the descriptions of the nature in the New World, which is pristine, natural, and this kind of idea of Eden as not something that is described in terms of empire or kingdom, but rather as untouched, pristine nature. And I wanted to ask you whether Boym's narrative or how it fits to this broader global images of nature, and whether there is really only one narrative about natural world in those kind of missionary accounts we find at that time. And the second question is kind of related to this, because it's about the status, metaphysical status of the pineapple, because you mentioned that since it does not grow from the seed, it is, from the biblical perspective, kind of problematic. But exactly at that time in Europe, there is this whole debate about substantial forms, and the fact that those new philosophers like Descartes and others are questioning the existence of substantial forms. And one of the defenses from the perspective, this kind of theological perspective, is precisely that, well, in the Bible, it is said that everything was created according to its genus, right? And basically, everything has its own, ontologically speaking, its own seed. And now I wanted to ask you to comment on this: how this kind of fruits like pineapples, but also sugarcane, which is also planted and cultivated in the very same way, could be used, or whether they were used in this kind of debates concerning the emergence of the new kind of, metaphysical perspective that departs from a scholastic tradition. I'm sorry for talking so long, but I'm wondering.
Thank you so much. Very interesting questions and complex. I think for the first one, we have to think about like a publication that is very strategic but also quite complex. So he was a Jesuit. He needed the head of the Jesuit order, Nickel Goswell, had to give his consent to publish this book. And any Jesuit who wanted to publish a book needed the consent of the head of the order itself. So obviously it has to fit within that realm. On the other hand, if he was thinking, and it's a big book, and the etchings are hand colored, so every image is colored one by one, so that raises the price. It's a very expensive, it's a very nice book. So who could afford that? He was also trying to obviously obtain sources, economic sources for their missions. And this is what the Jesuits were doing. So that's another interest that he had to keep in mind. And then third, he had to negotiate with the material he had in hand when he was working on it in Europe. He was traveling via land. So obviously, because he had to escape from Goa, he couldn't bring probably everything he planned to bring. So he had, let's say, a certain material available at his hand that he could use to write this book. And then also the time that he had to manage to make the publication happen, and also to obtain support from the Habsburg to publish the book itself. So there are so many interests in between that I think, and finally, I think that, and the most important, that for the Chinese mission, they found, and at the very last image in Flora Sinensis is actually the Nestorian stele that they found. And, that was for them a very important testimony that Christianity was present in China beforehand. So now they are not doing anything new, like the religion, the Catholic religion was present in China for a long time. And in that sense, like connecting all these dots together, basically the book itself, although it's about natural history, but it fits in all of these, realms. And I think the Nestorian stele, obviously, it's a very important, stamp at the end to say that, this is a very rich empire. They have everything. He can refer to the Bible, but also he can refer to the long history of the religion itself and its root that they found in China from older times. So that's the first. For the second, to be honest, he's quite practical in the text. So when it comes to describing the different, the fruits and the animals, it's really about cultivation. It's almost like a botanist that wants to know how it's cultivated, where you can find it, or from a trader perspective, or from he's not really adding further symbolic values to these items. What we can see when it comes to more philosophical question, like why he added the fenghuang, which is a mythological bird, it doesn't exist. He is listing out tradable goods. So what the fenghuang means here and how that fits into a philosophical discussion of what he wants to defend or what he wants to show with that. That can be something interesting. But there I would say that in many natural history books at that time and well into the 18th century in Europe, they still constantly use or add mythological animals into their works. So he's not the only one to do that. But on the other hand, I think he's adding it because culturally it has such a significance. And it's also like a testimony that he was here and he knows what has a value. And culturally, the fenghuang has a value even if it doesn't exist in nature. That kind of explain or makes him an excuse to incorporate it into his list of relevant animals or animals that are interesting for him. He doesn't really, in these works or even in Magna Catei or Clavis Medica, he doesn't refers to European philosophies. In Clavis Medica, he is translating or incorporating Chinese medical texts. So that's more like something where like translating to the European thinking how Chinese medicine works comes into play. But all this in Boym case is so much practical, and I'm not sure that he had time, within that short time where he was constantly traveling. He was always like in constraints of and still trying to work on his works, that he could also like integrate that conversation into his works. I hope I replied somehow to your question, but yeah, thank you.
You mentioned about Chinese medicine and practical value, So Michael Boym's findings. First question, his findings, was it ever translated into Chinese? Because at the back of my mind, what is the value, for all this, aside from maybe curiosity to bring something, exotic plants, fruits, animals? Your talk somehow helps me to reflect on another person of Paul Xu Guangqi, who wrote a book on, I think, 农政传书 is a compendium on agriculture, horticulture. Now, his findings of sweet potatoes now help to save thousands of people, Chinese, from famine, sweet potatoes. Now, so my question again, has there been any translation? What is the contribution of Michael Boym with all his short life, 47 years, but he must have traveled a lot and put down in writings and kept up correspondence with Superior General, a very loyal Jesuit. But throughout his life, now what is his contribution? Now, after in retrospect, with all his findings, what is the value in terms of, you may say, Chinese medicine? Any follow-up? Has there been any translation of his works?
Yes, I have. Thank you for raising that question. So about his texts that were published about Chinese medicine in Europe, there is a colleague of mine. She's basically did a PhD just on that. Because Boym described the pulse-taking method in this clavis medica is described, and what I have been looking is there are also diagrams that accompany the text, how you can diagnose and what you can diagnose. So Elizabeth, my colleague, she's doing a whole, like she finished her PhD, but basically it was all about how Chinese medicine was presented to the Europeans. And what we can see that in the 17th century, they are very open and they are very interested, although it remains an exotic knowledge. But in the 18th century, somehow, there is no follow-up, like there are not much information or practitioners coming, to as today you can still today is different because now you can have practitioners that you find in Europe, but at that time it was these separated single sources, written sources, which were not enough, obviously, to bring the whole practice itself to Europe. And in the 18th century, there is a change on how China was considered as well. So the interest later on fades. And we don't need to forget that the Chinese medicine operates on such a different logic that is quite complicated. And I think here, for example, philosophical question like how it's possible to translate it into the European logic or mentality to make it sense. It's a really difficult task to do.
But you may believe that William Harvey, when he wrote the book on the pulse, had read note Harvey published in 1613 or something, 1314. Okay, so that's true. And the book on the pulse, many believe was actually published by completed by this guy, William Tan Ringen, who published a book on acupuncture in the late 17th century. So there's been enormous contribution by the Chinese in the understanding of modern medicine. Also, Boym came from a period of humoral medicine, and then in the late 17th century, early 18th century, then you had Paracelsus medicine come into vogue. So there was a change in the ideology of what medicine was. And when he did his translations on the humoral side, he did translate the miasma as humor, okay, and as qi. Yeah. So I think throughout all centuries, there's always been a discussion of ideas.
Thank you for this comment. Yes. Would you like to comment on this? Or?
No, thank you.
You agree?
It's absolutely so.
Yes.
Michael Boym wrote in Cantonese. He didn't write in Mandarin.
Online, I don't see any questions online, so maybe one more question here.
No, I just wanted to ask about the authorship of Clavis Medica, because I know that there was some controversy about this, and
Yes, that's a complicated thing. I can tell you my view, but I am mostly, an art historian, so I am looking at a certain thing. So Edward Kajdansky was showing and collecting material at the Jagiellonian library, where some of the Boym's manuscripts or the things that Boym was carrying are dispersed. The other part is actually in Berlin at the Stats library there. Anyway, I think it's a very complicated issue because Kajdansky wanted to defend that Clavis Medica is by Boym, and also, and there is the other publication which was published in 1682, where his name is omitted. So in Clavis Medica, the one that in Clavis Medica, we can see that his name appears, but there is another book which Andreas Kleyer published in 1682, and there Michael Boym name is omitted. So the controversy is more about that book. And Kajdansky was saying that the authorship belongs to Boym, which was later contested by two scholars who were more who were writing about Chinese medical recipes in Europe. So it's a controversy where, to be honest, I didn't put my, I didn't, I don't think either, I didn't pick my side, because I don't need to pick my side, I think. I know that in Clavis Medica there is name of Michael Boym, so obviously in this book I'm looking at the diagrams and the images that I can find, and that is still attest that he was working on Chinese medicine, and he was his modus operandi appears similar to what we can see in Flora Sinensis or Magna Cathay. So these are the things that I have been looking at, and that's why I didn't feel the urge, to take part in that sense of the discussion. I don't feel that I am also the person who knows, most of, in that sense, of his medical texts to make that.
From what I have read about this controversy, it appears that there is a hypothesis that there were two texts. Boym simultaneously was working on two Medicus Sinicus. One text was given to Couplé when he knew that he was going to Europe, to make sure that the text arrives to Europe. But Couplé, if I well remember, when he was traveling through Batavia was in the hands of Dutch. They look at the text and they found out that there is extremely importance from scientific point of view. So they confiscated it, and later this text was found in the hands of, I don't remember whom, a scholar in Europe who published it under his name. So there is a suggestion that it was a kind of plagiarism, some people say. The second version that Boym was working on, so that he was holding with himself when he was traveling, we do not know the whereabouts of this copy, where it is. Maybe it can be found somewhere in the archive. Definitely prove that he is the ultimate, author of this text. But still, I think the research is going on.
And I think there are like overlapping textual things and formatings that are like that was Kajdansky was raising, and why he was like proving that the other books also belong to Boym.
Yes. Okay, if we do not have more questions, I think time's up. Thank you very much again for this wonderful presentation. Give hands to thank our speaker.